going to be twice as better than the last one.
All right. Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Two Man Advantage podcast. Let's try this again, Kevin. Lions, they finally win a game.
They did. They opened up the offense. They got Calvin Johnson involved, and Matthew Stafford actually looked like a bona fide NFL quarterback, if only for 1 week.
Exactly. They look good, and obviously against the Bears, it's really not saying much, but the Bears did come in on a hot streak, winning 2 games in a row, and the Bears look good, so it was a good win for them. It took a little bit longer, especially in overtime, for them to get the W, but now they have Minnesota coming in, and with that wicked Minnesota Vikings defense, I don't like the Lions' chances this week.
No, and the Lions' propensity to turn football over would concern me as well. But it was good to see that Calvin Johnson still had a pulse. It was his first 100-yard receiving game of the season. Certainly, they made some changes with the coaching staff, putting Joe Lombardi up in the coach's box and having their quarterback coach Jim Bob Cooter down on the field to help with communication and that sort of a thing. But when you look at the game itself, outside of Stafford's interception in the third quarter, I thought the offense looked as best as it had all season, and certainly the defense bent, but they didn't break. So
absolutely, I think, like you said, the defense did not. They bend, but they did not break, and they're really up for a really big test. And over the next 2 weeks, they have the Vikings now, and then they're all over the pond in London taking on the Chiefs. Without Jamal Charles, that's a winnable game against the Chiefs.
Well, if they want to save their season and make any formidable run to the playoffs, they've got to win the next 2 games, or virtually, with the hole they've dug themselves, their season would be virtually over. So the next 2 games will be critical. Obviously, I don't think they'll have a shot at the division. They've dug themselves too deep of a hole, but 2 winnable games. They have historically not been able to tackle Adrian Peterson, so that'll be interesting. And Minnesota has a top 10 defense, but if they want to salvage their season, this is a game that they certainly have to win.
No, absolutely. And talk about another big game that is football related, but it happened down the street in Ann Arbor, and the Michigan State Spartans pulled off a miracle. They pulled off a miracle, and they beat, or some people may think they upset the Michigan Wolverines on that last second punt situation that they ran back for a touchdown. Kevin, your first thoughts when you first saw that?
Well, my first thoughts are this. I put it on coaching and Harbaugh, Jesus Harbaugh, all the great stuff he's done under Resurrect Michigan.
The khaki Jesus.
Yeah. And certainly he has them more on the road to recovery, I guess, than people had thought initially, at least in his first year. But when you look at that particular play, why they weren't in max protection, I don't know. That's on coaching, particularly after Harbaugh had called the timeout and told them exactly what he wanted done. So that's on coaching. Obviously, Michigan State was going to still have to block the punt because that was essentially their only shot to win the game. And the death threat that Blake O'Neill has received as a result of the loss and the mishandled staff, I thought were unwarranted as well.
No, absolutely. I think it was a big game, yes, but these are just kids out there playing the game. And I know it's a very highly competitive school, highly competitive game, but some fans obviously either a little bit inebriated at the time, and to send him something like that, that's totally uncalled for. But Kevin, where do you see Michigan going after this tough, heartbreaking loss?
Well, they've got Rutgers this week. Obviously, Rutgers, they should win that game. It's a home game for them. Rutgers is not very good. I don't think their season is lost. Obviously, they've tied their win total of all of last year, so whatever they do now is gravy. But I do still think that the game against Ohio State has merit, particularly because Harbaugh has sort of expeded the turnaround here at Michigan. But in terms of the conference, when we look at Michigan State, they are 7-0, and now everything is trending for them. Their season hinges on whether they'll beat Ohio State or not, and with their injuries on defense, particularly in the secondary and offensive line, it may cause them trouble, particularly because Ohio State has changed to J.C. Barrett, which gives them a more athletic approach at quarterback as well.
No, it's true. So it's going to be an exciting year for coming down the wire, especially Michigan State, trying to get in that top 4 playoff spot. But from football, let's move over to baseball and those Toronto Blue Jays, Kevin.
The drubbing they took yesterday.
The drubbing they took yesterday on what it's, it seems to be, an up and down playoff run for this for Canada's only team. Where do you see them? Do you see them even having a shot at going back to Kansas City with 2 wins, or is this series over tonight?
Well, obviously if they want to win, they've got to win the next game. But I had to look at the Blue Jays this way: if they score, they win, because their pitching is sort of like a seesaw. Goes up and down and up. It's kind of like a yo-yo. It goes up and down and up. And R.A. Dickey was awful. Their bullpen was taxed. I don't believe in momentum, particularly in baseball playoffs, because you're only as good as your next starting pitcher. So it depends on the pitching performance that they get and whether their offense can get back on track as well.
Absolutely. From the AL to the NL, Cubs, Mets. Mets are up 3-0 in that series. And just because all the hoopla about, Back to Future Day, which is today, October 21st, 2015, the Cubs even have a chance of pulling off another miracle and winning 4 straight games to get to the World Series?
I don't think so, but I do think having the Cubs back in baseball, like relevant baseball, is good for the sport because of the market they play in, how loyal their fan base is, and having one of the top 5 managers in baseball. It's been a remarkable season for the. I think it'll end against the Mets, but stranger things have happened. All we have to do is look back at the end of that Michigan State game, which will be in college football lore for a long time.
Absolutely.
But I don't think the Cubs will come back in this series, but having them back as a relevant team in baseball is certainly good for the sport.
No, absolutely. So your prediction, are you taking the Royals and Mets in the World Series?
I will say that, and I will also say I don't think it will be a very highly watched series, just simply because of the markets that'll be playing.
Right.
I don't think it's a big national draw, but for the Kansas City Royals, are on a mission to finish what they started last year, and we'll see how big of a test that the Mets put up.
It's going to be an exciting series, no matter who makes it into the final round.
So before we came on, we're talking about undefeated teams in the NFL.
Yes.
We've got Green Bay, Denver, Cincinnati, and Green Bay.
Carolina.
Carolina, thank you.
Yeah.
And you were asking me earlier which one of the teams that I think has a chance to stay undefeated. And when we looked at Green Bay and New England, I think those are the teams that will represent their respective conferences in the Super Bowl. When you look at Carolina, I don't think they have the necessary offensive weapons. I mean, they run the football and they've got Greg Olson essentially on offense. When you look at Denver, they've got the number one offense in the league, but Peyton Manning has more interceptions than touchdowns. So when you look at Denver, I'm not buying into Denver just because of their offense being so inconsistent. I mean, they had to go to overtime to beat Cleveland.
Yeah.
But when we look at the undefeated teams, I'm not buying I think the Bengals are the most complete team left of the undefeated. But I looked at Green Bay and Denver as Green Bay and New England is representing the NFL in their 50th Golden Super Bowl. So I looked at and Green Bay and Denver play each other in 2 weeks. So obviously that'll go a long way to determining whether Green Bay will stay undefeated, and Green Bay's got a lot of injuries to their wide receivers and to their offensive line, so that'll play a factor as well.
Oh, absolutely. Those two teams that you talk about, New England and Green Bay, such, historical teams that have done so much for the NFL, good and bad for the NFL. So it's going to be an interesting take on where this season continues, or is this just pretty much the year of the Patriots saying F you to the NFL and Roger Goodell and just running the tables and winning it all?
Well, I think the Patriots are on a mission to prove the rest of the league wrong about the whole Deflategate situation. I think they got the revenge on the Colts this weekend for sort of being the whistleblowers for that situation. And going back to that particular game, what Chuck Pagano was doing on special teams, I don't know last weekend, but there may possibly be a new head coach in Indy based on that game. I mean, they spend a lot of their resources this offseason trying to beat the Patriots, and they still came up short. So.
Especially, and not having Andrew Luck for the last couple of games have been tough. He's back now, but, putting the ball in the hands of Matt Hasselbeck, the 40-year-old, it's not a winning position.
Well, they won the 2 games he played against inferior competition. I think it beat Houston and Jacksonville, one of the 2 teams he beat. So when we look at the Colts, I don't think they have enough on defense, and that's supposed to be Pagano's calling card or specialty, and so something they've struggled with all year. But when we look at what the Blue Jays have done going forward into the offseason, assuming they don't come back and win. But, when we looked at David Price and his future there, what do you think their extended playoff run will do for his willingness or wanting to re-sign with Toronto?
I think his familiarity with the town and the team can only put the Blue Jays in the best possible position for a chance to re-sign him. And I think they like I told you earlier, I think they have a really good chance at re-signing him. I think a 75% chance he's going to re-sign with the Blue Jays in the offseason. But he's happy what he's doing. He gets along great with the teammates. He loves the city, and if you can afford him, if you think he's worth all that money, playoff aside, he's a great regular season pitcher. Then fork it over, because if you want the big name stars, you gotta spend the big bucks.
Well, Alex Anthopoulos has proven that he's not afraid to spend any money, and the fact that there isn't a salary cap in baseball helps. And having Toronto back as a formidable power, because they can score runs. Obviously, after this offseason, they've got to make the decision on both Jose Bautista and Edwin Encarnacion. So there'll obviously be a limit to how much money they're willing to spend. But in that market, you've got to spend in order to win. And so certainly with the Blue Jays' new approach, it's refreshing to see that baseball in Toronto actually matters again.
Exactly, and you brought up a good point that baseball in Toronto matters, and just seeing the love of baseball during this playoffs across Canada has been amazing to see. I know it's when you're the only show in town, you kind of get flooded with all this Toronto Blue Jays love, yeah. But it's good to see the entire nation get behind one team, and it's a really us versus them mentality, which is always it's always fun to be a part of. But even if you are a true Blue Jays fan or a bandwagon jumper, you have to enjoy the ride, even though it might end tonight.
It has a good shot at ending tonight. As we saw, Kansas City's on a mission. But moving forward very quickly to the Tigers, we just want to send our best wishes to Daniel Norris, who was recently diagnosed with thyroid cancer, and certainly a major part of what the Tigers are hoping to be on the field. So we just want to send our best wishes to Daniel and talk a little bit about where this team goes in the offseason. When we look at what Al Avila said at his season-ending sort of media scrum, he talked about improving both the starting pitching and the bullpen as well.
No, absolutely. I think those are two very important factors when it comes to making any team a contender and consistent winning team. You have to have pitching, and more pitching. Like if you learn anything from Kansas City, look at their bullpen. If you get to the seventh inning with a lead, the game's over.
Well, the Tigers' bullpen was a bit of a dumpster fire this year. And if they want to contend, obviously, Avila said his two priorities are getting two starting pitchers, so that'll be interesting. And the assets they'll have to give up either by player or financially to get that done, and upgrading the bullpen as well. And the last thing I want to bring up with the Tigers is their decision to bring Brad Ausmus back for his third season. Right?
Third and hopefully final season as Tiger skipper. Like I said to you earlier, this is veteran players who are making millions and millions of dollars. I think you have to have some history in the league, not just the player, but as a manager. And him just coaching the Israel national baseball team, that's not enough to be coaching a professional baseball team, is especially something that has so much history like the Detroit Tigers. It's kind of hard when you're going from Jim Leyland to Brad Ausmus. It's just that's just going from both sides of the spectrum. But if you're a Tiger fan, you got to be hoping that there's someone else coming down the line, maybe a Ron Gardenhire. That'd be nice. Hopefully he can pick up his phone and maybe him and Al can work something out.
Well, when we look at Brad Ausmus and his future with the team, obviously the start they get off to will be critically important. One of the reasons that I feel like Dave for keeping Brad Ausmus on was his relationship in building the younger play or developing the younger players into viable pieces like JD Martinez, the young pitching staff with Daniel Norris and all of the pitchers that the Tigers had picked up in the trade with Toronto, and his ability to connect with those players, and obviously his ability to develop a starting rotation will also be key as well.
Yeah, absolutely. You're right. So there's a lot of optimism going into the Tigers offseason this year. And once the World Series is complete, then we can see the real fireworks go off.
Well, it'll be interesting to see the dynamics of how Avila and Ausmus work together, because it is a new dynamic. And Avila's been here a long time, and certainly with Dave Dombrowski now gone, this is his show to run as well.
Right. Well, that's great. Kevin, thanks once again for doing this podcast with me. If you like our stuff, check out our website at www.twomanadvantagepodcast.com. We're also on Facebook and on Twitter and on YouTube, where you can view all our stuff. Kevin just put up a great piece with St. Clair College National Championship women's softball team.
And you have a fantasy football.
We have fantasy football podcast
up,
tonight at 7. Yes.
Tonight,
yes.
so.
Derek looks to get on the board against TJ. He's lost 3 weeks in a row, so hopefully he can turn his team around and pick a winner this week.
We got to fly, everybody. Thanks for watching this live edition, I guess, of
Yes.
the Two Man Advantage podcast. Thanks for listening, and we'll talk to you next week.